Elisa.
Hello. Ciao. Hi. Ciao. Hi.
Sito YouTube.
Perfetto, eccomi. Ciao Mario.
Ehi, ciao Elisa, come stai?
Ciao Elisa.
Bene. Ciao a
Bene,
tutti.
bene.
Ciao Elisa.
Ciao.
Bene, bene. Eccomi
Bene,
qua.
piacere di vederti.
Ciao Elisa.
Ciao Elisa.
Elisa, aspettiamo un pochino.
So, let's wait for another.
Yeah.
Anche perché era, I think, sì, siamo 5 minuti ancora in anticipo.
I can start to share the screen just to see if everything works.
Sure, please.
Can you see it?
Sì.
Okay.
Try to maximize just to see if it's the right. No, you change the visualization. Yeah. Oh, quando vai lì basta impostazioni di visualizzazione in alto. Hai due schermi.
Sì.
Allora inverti oppure
Inverti visualizzatore e relatore,
Sì.
così.
È comodo per te?
Sì.
Sì?
Sì, sì. Sì, sì, va bene.
Ok. Perfetto.
A parte che posso togliere anche uno schermo, effettivamente. Non me ne servono due.
We are a little bit late because we anticipated a little bit the time.
Shall we wait for another, few minutes because just 25 people.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can get going. Mario, what do you think? I mean,
Yeah, I
yes.
started the recording.
Yeah. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Let us start with the second part of today's lecture. As I said in the morning, there are additional 3 topics in the afternoon. One is on finance, which is what we are going to discuss first.
Can I hear microphone?
I think there is someone with...
Lisa, can you unmute yourself because I muted everybody?
Okay, yes. So we're going to talk about finance first, and then we are going to move on to circular economy and green business models and conclude with the sustainable mobility. I will ask the speakers to take their allocated slot in terms of timing, and if I see that you're approaching the end of your allocated slot, I will inform you like 5 minutes left or something like that, okay? But try please to self-behave in a sense. So I will now leave the floor to Professor Ughetto for the first part of the finance, climate change and other risks slot. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. So, hello to everybody. My name is Elisa Ughetto. I'm associate professor at Politecnico di Torino. And today I will talk you together with Paolo Giudici. We will give a talk on the fintech market and fintech risk management. So, as you probably know, what is fintech? Fintech, when we talk of fintech, we mean a combination basically of finance and technology. And fintech refers to, for example, all those innovative companies that make the use of internet, cloud services, and software technology in order to provide financial services. And today, fintech solutions are considered as deep innovations that may have a strong impact and a strong potential to transform the financial industry, the financial services industry. In terms of market size, I reported in this slide a few figures. The fintech market accounts for 92 billion euros in 2018, and it is also expected to grow even more in the next years with a significant also compound annual growth rate. As you probably know, several ventures in the fintech industry have emerged in the last 2 years and have brought also to the market very disruptive solutions in several fintech subsectors, such as risk management, assets and wealth management, cryptocurrencies, payment systems, insurance, loyalty programs, so a number of subsectors. And of course, together with this spike also in the number of startups in the fintech sector, also the investors' attention has been increasing. In particular, this spike in the number of fintech startups also spurred investments by venture capital funds operating in this specific sector. Now I will tell you very, very briefly what venture capital funds are, because maybe some of you do not know exactly how we can define a venture capital fund. So what is a venture capital fund? It is a fund which provides finance generally to small companies which have a very high growth potential in the form of equity. These are typically specialized investors, so they specialize by sector, by stage of development of the companies they invest in. And together with funding companies, they also provide strategic advice to the invested companies. So, for example, they coach these companies, they provide firms with contacts, they help them to build a network, and this can be considered as a risk capital, I would say. So what is the aim of a venture capital firm? It's in general to generate a return on investment through typically a sale event or an IPO event, initial public offering event. As I was saying before, they are specialized investors and they are typically very much selective in their investment focus. Why? Because returns come in the form of capital gains at the end of the investment. So the idea is that in order to be successful, they really have to focus on deals that then reveal later on to be very successful deals. They invest in all stages, all firm stages, but especially they focus in the early stages in which firms are evaluated according to several investment criteria, but especially this kind of investors look at firms which are able to scale up in the future. Or they can also invest in more later stages, so they provide finance for expansion. What are they doing? They are typically investing in several rounds of investment, and they are typically investing not alone, but together with other co-investors. What is the difference with the private equity funds? Sometimes you can hear talking about private equity funds. Private equity funds are a little bit different because they invest, in this case, in more established firms. In order to facilitate their restructuring. Okay, so this is just a very quick outline of what is a venture capital fund. Just a few words on how they are structured, because these funds are structured as limited liability partnerships in which you have a general partner, which is the venture capital firm, which holds control over the committed capital and basically manages the investment process. And then you have the limited partners, which are the ultimate investors. So basically those who put the money, okay, in the funds. As I said, venture capital investments are staged, so money is invested gradually over time, and just if results come over the time. And the exit of a company is typically after 5-6 years. What we have seen in the fintech context, well, we have seen that this pulse of fintech venture capital, of fintech ventures have also spurred venture capital deals. So, for example, in 2019, the annual venture capital fintech funding in the US reached a record of $17.4 billion. And again, the most important sectors, which are the target sectors for venture capital funds, are payment systems, RegTech, InsurTech, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies. Also, very interesting, venture capital, fintech venture capital investments increased a lot over the last few years, and especially after the global financial crisis. As you know, the global financial crisis represented a major exogenous shock that destabilized the entire traditional financial sector. And so this impulse was actually due to two main reasons. So the first reason was that after the crisis, basically banks had to face stronger competition coming from fintech startups. Why? Because they had to face a stronger regulation. And so in those years, several fintechs started to provide products, services that were outside the scope of regulators, and which became clearly more attractive than the services provided by incumbents. And the second reason was that due to the financial crisis, many skilled workers working in the banking and financing sector industry had to leave their job. And so they started to search for new investment opportunities, new entrepreneurial opportunities, new entrepreneurial initiatives, which on the other side resulted in an increased supply also of investment opportunities for investors and for venture capital funds more specifically. So we can say that increasingly banks have an interest today in fintech. Because they realize that fintech innovations are really likely to disrupt their business models. And it is well also known that while banks have been able in the past years in general to integrate some of these technologies in their digital backends, they were and they are still much slower in internalizing, I would say, the digital servitization of front-end services and all the financial products. So that's why they are increasingly interested in fintech, because fintech allows to improve their overall efficiency, their overall transparency of banking services, and so on. The second reason is that the banks have also interested in absorbing these new enabling fintech technologies because they have to face the competition with new fintech players, okay, which are challenging their traditional functions. And that's why it has been observed that, especially after the global financial crisis, banks are started to interact more and more with fintechs through direct acquisitions, through strategic alliance, and also through their, as I said before, their venture capital arms. However, I would say that although this has been clearly observed, there is not so much research on these issues. There are a few papers looking at fintech venture capital, which are especially exploring macro foundations of fintech investments, but still there are a number of potential research questions that might be addressed in this area. That is the area I do research on. So, for example, explore more in details what are the investment strategies of fintech venture capitalists in both the way they select invested companies and the contribution they give to them. So in terms of the value creation, in terms of the impact on their innovative performance, financial performance, successful exit, and so on. One potential research question could be to see how this changes across different typologies of venture capital funds, because some venture capital funds are independent venture capital funds and follow the limited partnership scheme that we have seen, but some others are instead called captive venture capital funds because they have behind them basically a government, a bank, or a corporation. So it could be interesting to see if these kind of strategies are changing, if they are changing, and in which way after the global financial crisis. Of course, as with other types of research, it's always important, it's always challenging to find the good data to explore all these questions and to apply also the right empirical methodologies, for example, to disentangle some potential endogenous effects and so on. So Now I think I will leave the ground to Paola or Paolo Giudice. I don't know who is presenting.
Yes, it's me.
It's you. Hello.
Okay, good. Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you very
Now
much.
let's give the floor to Paolo.
Yes, thank you, Elisa. How about the slides? Am I be able to scroll?
Yes, you can download. You can upload your own slides.
Okay, because it's the same slide. Okay, anyway, I will do.
So in the meantime, if the students have questions, you can, as usual, write them in the chat, and then Elisa will pick them up and answer to you. And if we have time later, I mean, we can have a discussion.
Yes, just a second. All right.
Okay.
All right. So, okay. Good afternoon to all, especially to the students that I see the first time. When I say see, of course, online. That's obvious. Hoping to see you in presence very soon, here or in another place. So this, for me is quite emotional because it's the first time I speak in this PhD curricula, which clearly is a great initiative, national, in which you are all pioneers of a new adventure. So for me, it's a real pleasure to be here with you and tell you about our specific research field. When I say our, I mean mine and of Professor Paola Cerchiello, who cannot be here today. She's involved in another activity, and also the activity of our fintech laboratory that we have established at the University of Pavia some years ago. And so, having said that, I start with a summary description of this research work that I believe could be of interest to many of you, not only of those that are in the, let's say, socioeconomic risk and impacts framework, but also to people from other disciplines, particularly from the sciences, as this is a kind of bridging what Elisa very clearly said before about fintech and fintech ventures, and the need to collect data and analyze data in an appropriate way to respond to business and economic questions with scientific methods. That is the idea. So financial technologies, this was also already said by Elisa, but it's always, I think, necessary to start a presentation with a definition. No? The definition also tell you, let's say, the viewpoint of the speaker. No? My viewpoint is the viewpoint of a statistician. I'm a professor of statistics, but also a data scientist. No? So I'm a kind of technologist that works in the economic area. So I use the definition of the Financial Stability Board, which is an international, body that oversights the financial markets and provide suggestions to the G20 about financial rules that then are passed on to regional authorities. And the Financial Stability Board describes financial technologies as financial innovations enabled by technologies. Okay, but the key feature that distinguishes fintech from previous technological innovations, such as ATM, for example, is the fact that, as was clearly explained by Elisa, fintechs have different business models. It's not just the use of technology that changes the service, the financial service, but it is the business model itself that is being radically changed. it becomes a platform. It becomes a disintermediated service in which the users can interact with each other directly through a platform without intermediation. That is the key aspect. The fact that all these technologies live in a platform, so live in the world of the platform economy, in which platform, bearing few risks, can bring and sell services and data to many people. So that when I say platform, I'm sure that you immediately think about Amazon or giants of this kind. Yes, indeed, also fintechs are platform, maybe a smaller dimension, but that is the idea. So it is the idea of providing financial services through disintermediated and inclusive financial technology, because in disintermediated also mean the possibility to reach out to individuals regardless of their gender, income, place of living, socioeconomic conditions. So in principle, it's a very democratic service in principle. But of course, any good thing also bring bad things. And the bad things are increased risks. So anticipate what I'm going to say in a moment. Examples of fintech technologies arise in the several banking, in the several financial services that we can classify by type of activity, which is also type of market. No, what does a bank do? No, in the end, it provides lending. No, it provides management of the deposits into assets, no, investments. It provides payment services, and also some financial institutions that are called insurance companies. They provide coverage against risks. No? So these four are also the four areas in which you can classify fintech activities. So the peer-to-peer lending means that you can lend, 100 euro, 1,000 euro, 1 million euro directly. No, maybe Elisa can lend me 100 euro directly through the platform. If I am a trustable person, if Elisa thinks I'm a trustable person, or if the platform tells her that I have good rating, she can lend directly to me. Same, and so there are a number of fintech companies that do that through a platform. Also, you can invest through the smartphone. You can choose your own portfolio based on what the platform tells you about the risk and performance of the different assets, possibly ETFs that are passive, that are easier to understand, more transparent, more inclusive. Same for InsurTech. If you want to go tomorrow to, I don't know, New York, assuming that COVID does not exist, you can go, of course, you can buy a specific insurance. It's instant insurance whose price depends on where you go in New York, whether you go to Manhattan or Harlem or any other place. Okay, that's InsurTech. Last, payments. We all know about cryptocurrencies. Those are examples of digital coins. Cryptocurrencies are not yet digital, currency recognized by regulators. But very soon, likely in few years, there will be digital coins issued by the ECB, by the Bank of China, and so on. Those will radically change the system because each of us could have money directly from the central bank without going through the intermediary. So all these radically change the panorama of finance, and not just of finance, because it means disintermediation. So is it all good? In principle, yes. All these innovations increase inclusion. They can reach out to any individual in the world through, you just need a smartphone and internet connection, of course. Okay. So they reach out to everyone. They cost less. and they are, they increase user experience because you do what you want. No? You invest where you want. If you want to invest in green bonds, you can do it through the smartphone. You don't have to ask the consultant of the bank, please help me. You do it directly. So it's great inclusion, great experience, all good in theory. However, as I said, opportunities come with a price. The price is that you can have more risks. As anything that involves a smartphone that is quick and fast to do, there are risks. No? And this risk, for example, arise from contagion, because investments are in a platform are highly connected with each other. No? Their investment can shift quickly from one to the other. So there is high contagion risk. Now, if one large investor pull out of a certain investment, that means drop in price that immediately expand to the others. So there is high risk that you quickly lose the investment. This is particularly true for the world of cryptocurrencies, I would say. Another risk is cyber risk, no? The risk of cyber attacks, which dramatically grows with clearly with digital, no? With the cloud, dependence on cloud, with cryptocurrencies traded in crypto exchanges, which in principle are safe, but they are not, and with the rise of ways of launder and alter market integrity through digital coins, no? Especially because there are no national regulators. These activities are worldwide. You cannot stop them from being worldwide. It's like trying to stop the wind with your hands, no? They just go anywhere, and there are no regulators. There are few regulators that have work under international laws. So there are ways to hide. So for that reason, the risks are high. So in the last few years, in our laboratory, we had the pleasure to coordinate a European project that was exactly on this topic, no? Measure risks to maintain high the opportunities of fintech. That is what we've been doing. And I show you some result from this activity, which of course does not end with the project. The project ended a few months ago. Now we are continuing, particularly through this PhD program. We have scholarships that are dedicated to this idea, connecting the fintech with sustainable finance, because that is the next step. When you are inclusive, when you reach out to everybody, when you can decide, you can also decide in a sustainable way, in a way that favors sustainable finance. So that is the idea. So here is, so far, I told you many words. I told you that what is the main research challenge? That is to develop risk management models and standards to foster trustworthy application of technologies, particularly of AI, artificial intelligence, which is the technology which mostly depend on data, along with blockchain, that is a technology that makes data transparent and secure. So the idea is to employ. So our idea is not to say that the technology is not good because it be a risk, but the idea is to use the technology itself to measure such risk. No? So AI is not the evil, but AI can be good to measure its sins, no? The risks it produces. That is the idea. So whether they are platform risk, cyber risk of not being transparent, that's another problem of AI, the risk of explainability. So this is our research plan, and here are some results. This is one paper, a couple of years ago, so it means very old now. It is about the idea that companies especially when they work through fintech platform, are dependent through lending. So in this case, here is a network model, representation of many companies in Italy, Slovenia, and some areas in Eastern Europe. It is telling you that a company in red, which is a company with high probability of default, company in red can transmit the risk to the neighbors. The neighbor may be a company that is very good, but the fact that it trades with a company in red brings risk. Okay, trade to be neighbor doesn't mean that they live in the same area only. It means that they have common suppliers, common customers, maybe they belong to the same value chain. They are neighbor in many respects. So, and this is high danger. It is one of the most important reasons of the crisis that hit, for example, Italy in 2011, 2012, after financial crisis. It was a crisis of credit. No, that is like a snow slide. It rolls over company after company. Okay, so with this model, we measure the risk due to interdependence, contagion in the credit risk area. So we can tell, we can like turn on red light in the traffic light when a company is close, when a good company is close to a bad one in a number of senses. Another example of use of this, of AI to measure its risks is another work that we've done that concern stable coins. No? You know that stable coins is a particular type of cryptocurrency that is pegged to fiat currency, like dollar. No? So in that sense, it's more stable. One example is USDT, Tether, and some of them. Here we essentially we proposed to build a stable coin that is a basket of currency, not linked to a single currency like dollar, but to a basket of currency, no? Like the basket of the International Monetary Fund. This is called SAC. No? We plot the kind of normalized returns of this currency. Hypothetically, if the coin were issued in 2002 against the major world currencies, and it shows that the coin is by far, is this yellow thing, is by far the most stable because it keeps its value at one parity, whereas the others fluctuated a lot. For example, the Indian rupee and the US dollar have increased their value, which is good for some people, but not for others, no? Because if you import, clearly it's not so good that the dollar increase. If you export, instead it's good. But the stable coin has strong value, it's stable, essentially because it compensates currencies that increase in value with currencies that decrease, essentially, that is the main idea. So that's another way of area of research, very important in the field of stablecoin and central bank digital currencies. Work with a couple of PhD students. One now is research assistant. Another one is working at the Bank for International Settlement. Here is another paper that concerns cyber risk. Cyber risk is difficult to measure because the companies do not disclose the data, no? Because it makes sense that if I am an important company, I don't know, Amazon or Tesla, no? Let's say Tesla. I am Tesla, I receive cyber attack. I do not say I received a cyber attack because it's loss of reputation. So it's difficult to gather this data. But there are some data sources in the internet that are scraped from news and things in the internet. With this database, we work again with the Bank for International Settlements to provide a rough estimate of the variation of cyber losses due to cyber attacks in different sectors and according to different technology maturity of the different sectors. And we essentially obtained that some sectors have higher frequency of attacks, like financial sector, but lower severity. So it occurs often, but the impact is lower. Why? Because banks and financial services are more regulated, so they are more protected. Other sectors, like, for example, now I don't see because there is this thing, for example, the professional services, they have low frequency but high severity. So when it hits hard. Okay, maybe less frequency but higher severity. And then this is an example of work that is very important in the field of cyber risk, much connected with insurance, no? InsurTech and that kind of work. Last, I mean, I apologize, this slide is not readable at all, but I tell you what's in there. Essentially, here there are a number of 4 companies. For each company, it's important to estimate the probability of default of the company, the probability that it fails. Usually, people use balance sheet data along with other information. Here, our AI can do very well in terms of predictive power, but at the same time, AI is like our mind, no? It's not transparent, no? I'm sure all of you don't know what I'm thinking now, right? You don't know what I'm thinking, what is in my mind at the moment, because you don't see, no? You can guess, but you cannot see what is in my mind. That is the issue of transparency and explainability of the AI. AI, by definition, neural networks are like human minds. They're not transparent. So if you predict the probability of default of some of us is high, you should say why. Regression model tell you why. Neural network don't tell you why. So you need explainability. And that is very important work. Try to make the AI model risk low, working on explainability, making it explainable. These graphs essentially tell you which balance sheet indicator is most important in explaining the PD, probability of default, not whether red or blue, but with a high value. And there is much need of research in a related area that is called the fairness of AI. No? This is a very hot topic, concern potential discrimination bias of AI when it comes in particular to gender or treatment of minorities. This has to do with the ethics of AI. There are not much measurement available, but there is a strong need to work on this. No? And this is a research area that I believe very important. These were just a sample of examples, but clearly, the work to do here is so large that there is room not just for 100 PhD students, but maybe for 1,000, because these are topics that are extremely important in a world that is digital, and in a world that want to be sustainable, because that is the last thing I want to say. All these risks can be connected with ESG, no? With environmental, social, and governance risks that somehow measure the long-term sustainability. What I showed you, the risk measures that I showed you are like short-term, look into short horizon of investments or lending or whatever. But you have to think about longer horizon that take into account environmental, social, and governance sustainability. That is the issue of ESG. That is a factor that should be taken into account when measuring the previous risks. That is another very hot area in which even data are to be built. So going back to what Elisa was saying before, there is need of data. There's not just of any data, but of good data. And there are initiatives around that start from the bottom, like fintech, students, young people get together, connect, build data, create platform that provides data to people. That I think is a very interesting opportunity. We are working with such type of community in another European project. It's called Periscope. Community that is called the CoronaNet, that collects every day policies taken by the government to fight COVID. So it's a very large initiative, proposed by young people that are building a huge database across all countries. It is a great example of collaboration and data available for all. Data for good, I would say. Okay, this is what I wanted to say. You can see more of this in this link. You can also download the code if you're interested, not just the paper, but also the code, because to do our work, you need especially motivation. No? To work in this area, you need to be motivated, to be passionate. You also need some tools. Those tools involve knowledge of finance, knowledge of statistics, and coding, not advanced coding, but maybe R or MATLAB or Python would do. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Paolo, for this last discussion. I see that there are some interesting questions in the chat, particularly concerning the impact that either cryptocurrency or fintech can have on climate change in itself, but also on other social issues, including tax evasion and so on. So I think there's little time for opening a discussion on these very big, important topics, but I would call both Elisa, who has already started to do so, and Paolo to answer these very important questions in the chat. And of course, I think this question can be a little bit of a stimulus for us to organize then dedicated seminars on these issues throughout the work, the PhD as part of our curriculum. I think these are all very open questions, and there's a lot we don't know actually about, the impacts of these kind of new forms of finance. And of course, finance is always blamed, and so we have to. It's rightly so that we need to discuss it in a more critical fashion, and so all these questions appear very relevant and very timely. But also, I fear that there isn't a very conclusive evidence about them, and so this is very much open research areas. I don't know, Paolo, if you want to just.
For sure. What you said, Elisa, is the state of the art. No? At the moment, there are not answers, but there are many people that look for research in this field, especially concerning the metrics. Because, going to the question, yes, indeed, the blockchain, not cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency, is an example of application of the blockchain. That can also be speculative. It can also consume energy, because that is the case of Bitcoin, for example. Massive use of energy to mine the Bitcoins. But blockchain can be useful also for transparency, to collect data in a transparent way. When a company, for example, declares just to make a concrete example, CO2 emissions, that is a self-reporting declaration that can be true or can be false. But if it is reported in a blockchain, it lives forever in the internet. So, and it is checked for coherence against data of related entities. So for sure, it is true. So blockchain has great value to certify the real emissions and also the real measurement of other SDG values when it's possible, because blockchain is fully transparent. The problem is legislation, in my opinion, because all these things are very good, are new, certainly do good, but the legislation is national, typically national, it's fragmented. So it takes a lot of time for the government to agree on, for example, on central bank digital currency, like it is happening in the European Union. It takes time because legislations are afraid of the impact. But blockchain can certainly do good. Also, there is research, for example, by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, with which we have a connection. They are working on measuring the impact of cryptocurrencies, not just in terms of energy consumption, but also in emissions. So there is work that is concerned with the, the environmental impact of blockchain, of cryptocurrencies. But that's one side. The other side is to, as I said, for AI, use blockchain not just to measure the risk, but also take it as an opportunity to improve the traceability of the activities. So, but here there is much research to be done.
Okay, good. So thank you, Paolo. There are more questions in the chat, and I would kindly ask you to reply them there, as we did in the other sessions. I need now to shift to the next slot. We are going to talk now about circular economy and green business models. I think the first speaker, I don't know who's the first speaker. I don't see. Ecco, so
Hello.
Roberta Salomone is going to be the first speaker. I don't know if eventually Marco Frey is also, and
no, they are not coming. Maybe Paola, but it's not sure.
Okay, so we very nicely leave the floor to you now, Roberta, to represent that block. Of course, again, if there are questions, please write them in the chat, and as we move forward, the professors who've given the talk will try to answer some of your.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can start now. Thank you very much, Roberta.
Okay, thank you very much to you. I'm very happy to be part of this first cycle of seminar of our new PhD in Sustainable Development and Climate Change. In my presentation, I will briefly introduce some basic concepts and research issues in the new wide area of circular economy. Indeed, as you probably know, the circular economy has become a concept, a model that has caught the attention of all sectors of the society in the recent years, including academia, businesses, NGOs, and governments, of course. But there are many open questions that still need to be clarified, and in this presentation we will highlight some of them. In particular, we are going, after an introduction about the main circular economy concept, we will talk about the transition to a green and circular economy from a macroeconomy perspective. Then we will focus on understanding the role of green technologies. We will talk about then the role of the business sector and of sustainability management tools. We will then highlight the problem connected in the assessment of the sustainability of the circular economy practices at micro level. And finally, we will talk about the problem of disclosing the sustainability performance at company level. Thus, a sort of collage of the main research themes that some scholars of sustainability and circular economy involved in this PhD school are working on. So let's start with the concept of circular economy. Sorry, I see. Okay. Circular economy wish to find an answer to the current unsustainable linear economic development model. This has been described as a take, make, waste model in which we extract resources, transform them into product using energy. We sell, we distribute these products to consumer, and then we dispose them. But as we know, we don't have an infinite amount of resources. We don't have an infinite capacity of our planet to regenerate these resources. So the concept of circular economy is based on the transition from a linear to a circular model and this of economy, and this model is based on the notion of circulating material, circulating energy. Materials and energy are kept in the loop, reducing the depletion of natural resources, emission of pollutants, generation of waste. So what we suppose to obtain from this circular economy model is are different benefits that we can associate to the environmental dimension, to the economic dimension, and to the social dimension. So circular economy is supposed to have benefit in terms of sustainability, creating, for example, less demand of virgin material and energy, a lower environmental pressure related to extraction, atmospheric emission, waste production, less dependence on virgin raw material and then their importation from other countries with a greater self-sufficiency, price stability, new opportunities to create new jobs, promotion of innovations that bring a competitive advantage to companies and to the product of these companies, better quality of life, saving for consumers who use more durable and innovative and eco-friendly products. As I said, I stress the fact that I said that circular economy is supposed to have these environmental, social, and economic benefits, but because we will come later on this concept. So we can say that there is no single and standardized definition of circular economy. The concept has become popular in the last 10 years, we can say, and there are still many interpretations and definitions of circular economy. Here in this article, for example, Kirker and others found more than 110 different definitions of circular economy. This doesn't mean, however, that the concept is new at all, is a new concept at all. Indeed, in this article, we highlighted that the circular economy has origins and precursors that take back at the beginning of the 19th century, and only the word circular economy itself is relatively new and is just recently catching academic attention. If we look then at the word cloud here, it shows that behind this apparent diversity in definition, the concept is rather homogeneous. In fact, there is an important focus on business and industrial aspect with words such as development, management, efficiency, strategy, design, resources, production. There is a lesser focus on environmental aspect with words such as sustainable, environmental, regenerative, renewable, natural, and no occurrence of social aspects such as justice, fairness, governance, democracy, equity. Thus, the benefit that I reminded to you before on the social dimension is here lacking. So what we found is that there is a weak connection of circular economy concept, discourses, and models with the social dimension, even if this is a basic concept reminded also in the EU directive on circular economy. Another important issue that I would like to stress to you is that circular economy is not just waste recycling. Many people continue to erroneously think that circular economy means to recycle, to reuse, but circular economy is a much more complex paradigm that assumes the transition to a new model of economic development and a significant cultural change. There are a multitude of circular economy options, circular economy strategies that can help us to start understanding this complexity. For example, here you can see the 9 R's. These 9 R's are key strategies. These key strategies are hierarchical. Clearly, some are preferred to others. And as you can observe, the landfill step, that is something that we always find in waste management, in resource management, does not exist in a circular economy. The scissors that you see below. A circular economy is restorative, is regenerative by design. Its key objective is to maximize the value of resources, redefine products and service, minimize negative environmental impact. Indeed, if we look at this other representation of the 9 R's, we can see that reuse and recycle are much closer to the linear economic model respect to the circular one. Another element of complexity that affect the complexity of the circular economy definition, context, and model is that circular economy strategies can be implemented at different levels. We can implement them at micro level. The micro level aims to adjust the industry, the society structure, and the global or national economy structure, promoting sustainable production and consumption activity, for example, through designing and implementing the implementation of proper public policies. The meso level refers to closing resource loops, mainly developing, designing industrial symbiosis initiative, eco-industrial parks. It is observed as an interfirm level in which circular economy strategies should encourage the development of network. The micro level focuses on products, on companies, on consumers, and at this level, companies are encouraged to reduce resource consumption, to minimize pollution and waste, to design more environmental friendly products, and so on. Some authors also highlight that there is also a nano level. In this case, we specifically refer to strategies focused on single components, on single substances, on single materials. Furthermore, the complexity of the circular economy is also, highlighted in this figure from Leader and Rashid. In this figure, we can see that the implementation of circular economy strategies requires a collaborative approach, requires a concurrent top-down effort, ensuring the convergence of all relevant stakeholder interests in order to reach circular economy goals. From national efforts that are expressed, of course, through legislation, proper infrastructure and resources, and a bottom-up effort in which companies, single companies, have a basic role. But why the concept of circular economy became so popular, especially in the last few years? Because it is one, together with the green economy, it is one of the building blocks of the central issue of the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal is one of the central recent European policies on sustainability topics. It aims to transform the European Union's economy for a sustainable future. And this can be done through different actions, for example, mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy, supplying clean and affordable energy, preserving ecosystem, preserving biodiversity, and so on. And decarbonization and circular economies are the center of these new European policies, where in both green economy and circular economy, where innovation play a crucial role in achieving sustainable development, in achieving a sustainable transition, together with the ambition to decouple resource use from economic growth. And these two concepts of decoupling and innovation will be the next main topic. First of all, this huge transformation outlined by the Green Deal require a change in the way, in how we produce, in how we consume, in how we trade. And indeed, one of the Green Deal's most important contribution is to the Global Agenda 2030 is to the SDG number 12, that, as you know, is Sustainable Consumption and Production Partners. And the European Green Deal aims to transform the European Union in a fair, prosperous society with a resource-efficient and competitive economy, where there are no net emission of greenhouse gases in 2050, and where economic growth is decoupled for resources use. The term decoupling or delinking is usually used to mean the possibility of economic growth that we measure by the rise in gross domestic product that take place simultaneously with a fall in resource consumption and environmental impact. According to the OECD, the term decoupling refers to breaking the link between environmental bets and economic goods. So the linking is a process of impact reduction while the growth and development increases. So here in the sample, you see the indicator CO2 GDP, it decreases because emission decreases, and GDP increases. The delinking process is absolute if we have a negative relationship between the increase in per capita income and environmental impact, and is relative when the relationship between economic growth and environmental impact is still positive but decreasing. For example, GDP increases by 3% and CO2 only by 2%. There are many different indicator, resource efficient indicator, decoupling indicator that are increasingly used to evaluate progresses in the use of natural environmental resources. Few European countries also started to include the delinking oriented indicators in their official analysis of environmental performance. Here in this figure, you can see the example of the resource productivity indicator. It is the efficiency indicator that indicates whether an economic system or even a company is in the process of reducing its impact. The resource productivity indicator quantifies the relationship between the economic activity that here is expressed in GDP and the consumption of material resources that here is measured with the DMC, the domestic material consumption, that is one of the main indicators that we can derive from the economic-wide material flow cost accounting. Here you can see the Eco Innovation Index, because of course innovation is one of the forces that increase environmental productivities. So it's through innovation that we can reduce emissions and increase GDP. And the example here of the Eco Innovation Index is how the member state, we can measure the performance of the member state on environmental performances. This is a composite indicator obtained by an unweighted average of 17 indicators. You can see here the link to the website where to find other information. So innovation is crucial to drive resource productivity. But what is innovation? What is eco-innovation? Eco-innovation is an innovation that allows to obtain a less environmental harmful compared to that of other relevant alternatives with a life cycle perspective. When we refer to a less environmental harmful effect, we refer, for example, to using less resources or using less toxic materials or emitting less, a lower amount of pollutants or not using fossil fuels. Together with this, another characteristic is that the innovation must be innovative. We need an element of novelty. That means something that is new to the firm and to other users. What are the barriers to eco-innovation? The barriers to eco-innovation, there is no easy answer to this question, because there is probably not a single factor at play. Maybe we can have several factors that influence the diffusion, the introduction and the diffusion of an eco-innovation. This factor can be context specific, so depending on the country, depending on the industrial sector, they can be felt differently in different levels. Some barriers are common to other general innovation, where other are specific to the environmental protection company which characterize eco-innovation. Regarding the drivers of eco-innovation, we can identify market pool drivers, for example, the preference of consumer for environmental friendly products, technology push drivers, such as, for example, the technological condition, the organization capabilities. There are then drivers that are firm specifics, depending on the size, the location, the age of the company, and, for example, the involvement in networks of the company in networks. And finally, the so-called regulatory push-pull effect that are mainly linked to are regulation-driven factors. This allows us to understand that this strategic role of innovation, eco-innovation, and introduction of green technologies in the context of circular economy and sustainability transition in general is guided by companies, is guided by the business sector. And in this context, some on which our colleague Alessandra Colombelli is working on, we have to highlight the role of green startups. The creation of green startups indeed is a way of introducing green technologies onto the market. Indeed, green technologies can be introduced in a specific context through the creation of new startups involved in the generation and the commercialization of technologies in which the environmental performance of the firms that adapt them are improved. Thus, understanding the dynamics of the creation of green startups can provide useful information on how to boost a sustainable development through the interaction of the positive effect of green technologies and entrepreneurial dynamics. Again, stressing the role of the business sector in the circular economy domain, our colleague Marco Frey is working mainly on the role of business sector and the role of sustainability management tools. We want to start from the Global Compact. The Global Compact was founded in 1999 at the World Economic Forum in Davos. In that occasion, Kofi Annan, that was in that period the Secretary General of the United Nations, proposed for the first time in history to found a pact between the United Nations and the private sector. The goal was to give a human face to the global market, which was more equitable, transparent, inclusive, and for the first time, it was recognized a role to companies that was not only having a profit as a unique purpose, but to see themselves as actors of social change, bearers of culture and well-being to communities. This gave the chance then to catalyze the attention of the UN goal, first started with the Millennium Development, but then in the more complete Sustainable Development Goals that we know so well. Companies have this basic main role in circular economy, and we have in this new competitive landscape the opportunity for business to distinguish themselves in the transition by embracing, for example, existing sustainable management tools, sustainable management instruments. There are some critical tools, methods of the environmental management and sustainability management domain that can be adopted by companies in order to innovate, in order to obtain improvement in their sustainability performances. For sure, we can refer to environmental management systems according to the IMS regulation to the ISO 40001. Some studies that are here cited in this slide have shown that the environmental management systems positively affect environmental performances, and this as a consequence has a positive effect on the competitiveness of companies. Furthermore, in the last revision of ISO 40001, and thus also included in the IMAS, a life cycle perspective has been included in the environmental management system. Thus, companies are not committed only in improving their environmental performances at company level, but need to have this life cycle perspective, thus including the continual improvement of the environmental performance of their product, with taking consideration the whole life cycle. Thus, company can, using these critical sustainability management tools, can offer green products to reduce their environmental footprint, to stimulate a circular consumption, a circular production. Life cycle assessment can be used as a basic tool of this physical accountability of companies and product, in order then to obtain environmental labels such as eco-label, such as carbon footprint, that companies may adopt to increase the sustainability of their products and services. So, stressing this role of the micro level, when I refer, as I repeat, when I refer to the micro level, I refer to companies, but also to products. The micro level in the circular economy model is highly relevant because companies are the entities that transform natural resources into products, and because the concept of circular economy, as we said at the beginning of this presentation, promises profitability due to less expenditure and price volatility risk. The European Commission, in this figure that you can find here, for example, identifies 4 primary circular economy areas that are waste becomes a resources. This is highly linked to industrial symbiosis concept that we don't have time to discuss today. Then circular design, product as a service, and sharing economy. What I would like to stress with you now is with these two questions. But are we sure that circular options are always preferable to linear option? How can we be sure that a circular strategy implemented in a supply chain at company level and so on is a better option with respect to the traditional linear process, production, life cycle, and so on? In order to answer to this question, we have to measure the benefit, the results connected to the circular option and compare it with the linear option. Thus, in order to do that, we need to assess the sustainability of circular economy strategies at company level. And this is one of the main research topics in which we are involved in. We investigated the different circular economy indicators that are available at micro level. Here you can see in the table some of them. The most used one, probably the most popular and used one, is the material circularity indicator of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that you probably know, the butterfly that is designed here in the slide. And then we also, after this review of academic and gray literature method and tools to assess circular economy at micro level, we compared for some case studies these circularity indicators with LCA studies applied to the same cases. What we found is that in general, I try to summarize it, in general, there is a lack of consensus on how to measure circularity at company level. And there is a huge diversity of methods, tools, criteria. Generally, these methods are focused on resource efficiency. So this means that they are able only to give information about resource efficiency. But as we said in the beginning of this presentation, circular economy is a much more complex concept that includes also not only resource efficiency, but a wider representation of the environmental sustainability, as well as the economic and hopefully social dimension. Various methods that we identified have an LCA and life cycle assessment method as basic methodology. In our comparison, we we found trade-off between circularity and environmental sustainability when we compared the results from circular economy indicators and LCA results. And in general, we found, as I said, a weak link to the multiple dimension of sustainability, with a general focus on the environmental dimension, and within the environmental dimension, limited on the resource efficiency. This is why LCA should be, life cycle assessment should be used to assess the sustainability of circular economy at micro level. What is LCA? LCA is a method that is a standardized method by ISO 40040 family that allow assessing the potential environmental impact of a process, a product, a services by following the whole life cycle phases from raw material extraction and processing through manufacturing, transport, use, and end of life. Of course, there are some positive aspects in applying LCA in measuring circularity strategies, as well as some negative ones. The positive effect is that LCA allow to assess the environmental sustainability of the whole environmental sustainability behavior of the option that we are analyzing, but of course is much more complex. LCA can allow us also to assess other circular economy perspective, not only the resource efficiency. For example, we can assess through LCA the slowing and closing of the resource loops, taking into account also how to avoid the burden shifting between one life cycle phases to another. What we propose is to have an integration, an integrated method that use both selected CA indicator, circular economy indicator, and LCA. But again, we should stress that this integrated approach will allow us only to assess the environmental sustainability dimension in order to be able to fully assess the sustainability of a certain circular economy practices, thus including not only the environmental dimension but also the economic and the social one. We could extend the life cycle thinking method also to life cycle costing and social LCA that respectively allow us to assess also the potential economic and social impact of our circular economy practice. But again, there are many open questions on which we are working on, and if you are interested, we can also discuss together, or you can ask for further clarification. The last part of this collage of research activities within the circular economy domain that I would like to show to you is regarding non-financial reporting. Non-financial reporting in the last few decades, academics, practitioners, international and national organizations have shown growing interest in non-financial reporting and in corporate social responsibility disclosure. So how firms communicate their environmental, social, and economic performances with a certain level of transparency about their policies, their activities, and so on. In particular, the European Commission has adopted in 2014 the Directive 19.5 that relates to the disclosure of non-financial and diversity information by certain large groups. This directive requires large companies to disclose certain information regarding how they operate and how they manage social and environmental challenges. The aim is improving transparency of social and environmental information in order to identify sustainability risk and increase investor and consumer trust, and help investors, customers, the financial communities in general, but not only the financial communities, to understand how these companies are managing environmental and social issues. In particular, companies that are required to this non-financial disclosure should include information about the environmental matters related to their activities, for example, water use, greenhouse gas emission, air pollution, and so on, but also social and employee related matters, for example, gender equality, working condition, and so on, together with human rights and anti-corruption and bribery. There is no binding framework, reporting framework to be used. So any particular framework or key performance indicator to be used, their focus is on complying with principle and contents, but some frameworks are referenced even if they are not exclusive. For example, the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, just to cite one among others. I don't know if this is a research topic that is followed by Paolo Rossi. I don't know if in the meantime she arrived or not. But in any case, I have finished the presentation. Here you can find all the email of the colleagues that are involved in this research topic with the specific research team that we are on which we are working on. That's, I think I have completed. Maybe
so thank you.
I went faster than expected.
No, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, Roberta, thank you very much. Roberta has made the effort to actually give up presentations also for the research topics and research areas of the other colleagues in this block. So I think there are some questions. So we have a little bit of time for questions before we move on to the next topic. I don't know if you want to, Roberta, if you feel like answering these questions or there's one of life cycle assessment and for instance, which might be like relevant to you, in which way this assessment can contribute to improve the CE. Licina has asked this question. There are other questions on the Internet of Things to facilitate traceability of circular supply chains. Yeah. Can you see the questions, Roberta? So I don't know what, I don't know if you want to take some of them.
Maybe I closed the
No, we still see your presentation.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, we no longer see it, but
Okay. So regarding the first question, I don't know where it starts. Okay, but
yes, take from there.
You tell me, yeah. So regarding yes, we are actually working on better understanding the role of life cycle assessment in assessing the sustainability of circular economy strategies. As I said before, we cannot give for granted that each circular option is sustainable, okay, respect to the linear one. In order to understand this, we have to compare, to measure the effect, the results coming from, with a life cycle perspective, coming from the circular solution, the circular option, and compare it with the linear one or the traditional one. This is.
Can I just jump into this? Because I think I also have a question on that. I'm not an expert in circular economy myself, but I've been working on toxic chemicals for a project. And so what I've read, that one of the challenges of circular economy is actually inserting into products chemicals that have been in the meantime banned because of their toxicity being discovered later on and therefore regulated much more recently than when they were used. So basically, this could be even a potential threat that we are reusing substances that should go out of the market through the circular economy. You know how they're dealing with this in the companies or regulation?
Yes, for example, in this case, this is obviously a problem of regulation, okay? That must, but before the regulation, we have to understand how we can propose alternative solution. So what we have to do first is to compare what happens when the toxic substances comes at the end of life and is disposed and must be treated for the disposal. What happens if we use and reuse and continue to use it in the loop, maintaining in the loop these substances? We have to compare before, to study the two scenarios and compare them in order to understand which is the best solution. Only after having done this, we can give answer to regulators in order to understand which is the best design for that supply chain. The other question was about...
Well, what was about the Internet of Things? If it can
yes, of course.
the traceability
Yes, of course. Internet of Things may facilitate the traceability of substances, of single components, of materials, can allow us to understand how many times, how many times that material was in the loop, can also allow us to share information between different supply chains, because a material component can be reused also in supply chain different from the first one in which we use it. And for example, there are many obstacles, again, regulatory obstacles that must be faced, in which Internet of Things can help. For example, we also have worked on in the last month on the WEE, so the waste from electronic materials, that are a very interesting part of material components, raw material, rare material that we should better study in order to understand how to close the loop, but it is not possible to trace their flows along the supply chain, and Internet of Things could be a solution. It's proposed by some authors, indeed.
Okay.
What else? I don't know if...
I think you've answered all the questions that were in the chat. Of course, you see that you have the reference professors for each of the topics, so you are like invited to contact them if you have further interests. And of course, we will try to stimulate more discussions on that with the dedicated seminars on each of these topics later on. Of course, more specialized and going deeper. Then, okay, so I think it's about time for me to thank Roberta and invite the last speaker for the last block of our, so Lucia, I see her here. And so she's going to take, together with Elena, I know both of you are going to speak about sustainable mobility. Okay, so again, floor is yours. Thank you very much. So perhaps let me say, because we are 4 minutes in advance, perhaps I can give like 4 minutes up until 4:15 when we are due to start to the students, not just to go away, but at least we have a coffee, like 4 minutes, and we start on time at 4:15 because I think it's very intense. So having 4 minutes break, just move around, even your own room can be helpful. You don't have to leave. I mean, it's just that you can, stay in the meeting, but just take a coffee or a glass of water. Okay, in the meantime, Lucia, everything's well with you? I see you and I don't see. Yeah, we don't hear you. Are you muted? Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. No, I was saying everything okay, and during this period, it's not, no.
Yeah, I'm done. I've already had COVID, so.
Wow.
I have 3 shots at COVID, so I can.
My God.
I hope up until, I mean, in the next 5 months,
yeah.
I hope I'm safe, kind of safe in the next.
What about you? Well, okay. But see, now it's spreading so fast. And I mean, yeah, almost all my friends had at least one person now being infected by, and then, yeah. I don't know, hopefully. But it's sort of diminishing, at least in the effects.
Yeah, I mean, I had very light symptoms. And so all my family had very light symptoms, just.
Yeah, okay. Some sort of a flu, as they say.
Sorry, yeah.
Some sort of a flu, as they say.
It's even lighter than a flu.
If you are in the lucky segment of the population.
Yeah, it's very bimodal.
Subjective, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we are having the last beat. So Lucia, you're speaking first, and then Elena?
Yes, yes. We're sharing our presentation, so we'll describe the first, I guess, 5 slides or so, and then Elena will finish the second part. Now we'll present the second part. So there will be also tomorrow, no? Correct? This is
yes, this is the conclusive
seminar
lecture.
All day, or yeah. Mm-hmm.
They have one additional day.
Yes. And do we have a meeting, however, tomorrow afternoon at 5 or not? Not sure.
What? Sorry?
do we have a meeting as, I mean, sort of teachers of curriculum 2?
I'm not sure. I don't think we have a meeting, but
okay.
I think Mario knows better. When he comes back, we will.
Okay.
So our students for for curriculum 2 will have the first lecture of the curriculum on the 7th of February, because I will be giving like an introduction to research methods.
Okay.
But this is just for curriculum 2. So we will see each other in like 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, now I think we can
start.
Yeah, resume activities and start back. Yes.
Okay.
So I would ask you, Lucia, to start now.
Okay, thank you so much. So I am Lucia Rotaris. I work at the University of Trieste as an associate professor in applied economics. And today I'm gonna talk about the sustainable mobility. I will share the presentation with Elena Maggi. And the focus of the part that I will present is on the importance of transport services for any economic system, but is aimed also at underlying the environmental sustainability problems dealing with this sector. And then, of course, Elena will describe the possible solutions in order to manage this problem, now the sustainability, the environmental sustainability of this sector. So let's start with the first part. So transport is an essential service for any economic sector. It is an essential activity for anything that we actually do in our daily lives. Now, if we go to the university, if we go shopping, if we go visiting our parents, friends, we need to use a transport service. We can either buy a transport service provided by a third party. Now we take the bus, we take the train, we take an airplane, or we actually produce the service that we actually use. This happens when we drive our car or the scooter, as I said, in order to reach the destination where we will do the activities that we want to do. So transport is essential for almost anything that we do outside our houses, if you want. But it's essential also for the production of goods that we buy in the market. I mean, any firm needs to get the production inputs needed in order to make the product that they sell in the market. And so they need to get these inputs. It could be raw materials, intermediate products, or packaging, for example, material. Either again, buying the transport service needed to get this material from a third party, from a provider, or using their own fleet in order to get these inputs. And of course, for firms, it's essential also to deliver the product that they make. And then again, transport is an essential activity. Okay, so the point is that transport demand is essentially a derived demand. So it depends on the one side on the kind of activities that we carry on during the day, and then the places that we need to reach in order to do these activities. And on the other side, on the supply chains, providing to the market the products that are bought by customers. So this is the reason why in the title of this slide, I've written transport is essentially a derived demand. So we do not buy a transport service for itself, but rather due to the fact that the transport service allows us to do some activities, the activities that we do in places that are different from the places where we actually are. Now, the point is that the strict relationship that there is between the demand of transport services and the production of goods that are actually sold in the market. Now, this strong relationship is depicted also by the data that are describing us how the GDP is increasing over time. This picture is describing the increase of GDP within the European market, starting from 1995 to 2019, depicting an increase which has been of 45%, an increase which is mirrored, if you want, by the demand for transport services for passengers. It is the green function that you can see in this picture, and transport services for freight. It is the pinkish functions that you can see in this diagram. So simply having a look at this diagram, you understand the strict correlation that there is between the production of goods, the increase of the wealth of an economy, and the increase of the demand for transport services. So transport is a critical sector for an economic system. It is critical also because it is the second larger area of expenditure of European households. It contributes to more than 5% of European GDP as a sector, and it employs directly around 10 million workers. So it is an important, significant economic sector per se. It's not only a critical auxiliary activity sector, but it's also a relevant sector per se. Now, the problem is that the transport sector also produces many negative externalities. What are negative externalities? These are the costs that are produced by an economic agent while he is consuming or producing a product, a service, a cost which is not paid, however, by this economic agent, but by other individuals. In the case of transport, let's imagine that you use your car in order to go to the university. Well, the point is that while you are traveling, you are indeed paying the cost of this trip, in terms of the fuel that you need to buy, the fees that you need to pay if you cross a limited traffic zone, for example, or the fees that you need to pay if you use an highway, the costs of the maintenance of the vehicle that you're using. But you're also producing air pollution, for example, which is highly impacting the health of the citizens that are living in the region that you're crossing with your vehicle. You're also producing CO2 emissions. You're also producing noise. So you're producing many costs that are paid by people that are not at all involved in the transport activity that you're carrying out. Now, these costs are called externalities. And I mean, in Europe, the monetary value of the negative externalities that are produced by transport has been estimated to be about 1 trillion euro in 2016. So it's a huge and enormous amount of money, a cost which is not directly paid by the people actually producing and consuming transport, but which is paid, however, by the society as a whole. How can we describe these costs? Well, most of them, almost 30%, are referable to the number of accidents that are caused by this kind of activity. It is estimated that road accidents produce 5,000 premature deaths per year in Europe. And it's this big slice of this diagram here. So a large amount of the externalities have to do with accident, but there's also a 30% of externality referring to congestion. What do we mean by congestion? This has to do with the extra time that we need to take in order to travel to reach our final destination if the transport infrastructure that we're using is congested. It means that the number of users is larger than the capability, than the normal capability of this infrastructure. If this happens, the time that I need in order to reach my final destination is longer. I face delays, and this represents, of course, a cost. It's a cost not only for me that I'm using the car, but also for the other drivers that I'm using the same road infrastructure. Okay, it could be road, but it could be also another different type of transport infrastructure, of course. And this is, again, congestion. The cost of these delays is really large. It represents a very large component of the negative externalities caused by transport. And this has also to do with, of course, the delays that are actually faced within the supply chains. The news are, in the news you can find many data on the extra costs that are faced by firms due to this congestion, due to these delays. And then, of course, there's the cost of climate change, almost 15% of the total, and the cost of air pollution, which is affecting not only human health, but also the environment. So what can we say? We cannot have an economic system without transport. It is an essential activity, but at the same time, it is also an enormous source of social cost, of negative externalities. What is the impact of the existence of this negative externality? Well, I explain you the impact of these externalities using this diagram. The end of the story is simply this, that we will end up using too much transfer services, consuming too much transfer services, okay? Why? Simply because the costs that we are producing when we use the system are not entirely paid by the people, by the individuals that are either using the service or producing the service. Now, let's see how it works using this diagram. So in this diagram, I represent in the horizontal axis the number of users of the transport system. Okay, so it is increasing along this horizontal axis, while in the vertical axis, I am depicting on the one side the benefits that these people get entering the system using a transport service. And on the other side, the costs of using these services. These costs can be either private or social, as we said before. So this could be costs that are paid by the users themselves or paid also by the society. So let's see how these different benefits and costs are described in this model. So the black function is actually describing the demand for transport services. It is negatively sloped, meaning that the benefit that each additional individual that is entering the system and using the transport system is getting from using transport services is diminishing. So we are depicting the benefit of these people from the one getting the highest benefit to the one getting the lowest benefit. While with the red functions, I'm depicting with the flatter one, the private costs that I need to face in order to use or to produce a transport service. Say that you take the bus, it would be the cost of the ticket to get the bus. Say that you use your scooter, it will be the cost of buying the fuel rather than the maintenance cost of your scooter. Now, the point is that this and the steeper instead the function, sorry for this, is depicting not only the private costs, but also the negative externalities that we are producing when we are using our scooter. The vertical difference between these two functions is representing precisely the monetary value of the negative externalities associated with this level of traffic. Now, what happens if we don't take into account the social cost of transport? That the equilibrium of this market will be reached at point A in this model. That is when the marginal benefit of using the transport system is equal to the private marginal cost. And And so the transport level, the number of users that will be in the system will be equal to Q1. The point is that if this is the equilibrium, we are producing a value of negative externalities, which is not counterbalanced by the benefits of using the system. This outcome, this equilibrium, is inefficient, is not maximizing the social efficiency, so the welfare of the system as a whole. If instead we take into account also the negative externalities, so we go for an equilibrium which takes into account the climate change cost, the air pollution cost, the noise cost, and so on and so forth, we would reach a different equilibrium, which is depicted in this model by capital letter B, which corresponds, as you can see, to a traffic level, to a number of users, which is much smaller than before, which is indeed internalizing, that is making pay to the users of the system, the negative externalities that I was describing before. Now, I want to pinpoint one important aspect of all this, that also when you reach this optimum equilibrium, this is the equilibrium equating the benefits of using the system with the total costs of using the system, both the private and the external costs. When you reach this equilibrium, it doesn't mean that you're not producing CO2 emissions, air pollution, and so forth and so on. It simply means that you're producing, let's say, the optimal quantity, that is a quantity of environmental impact, if you want, which is, however, counterbalanced by the benefit of being able to reach the final destination that you need to reach, okay? So there is a balance between the environmental cost and the benefits obtained by the users of the system. Now, the point is to move the equilibrium of the transport sector from equilibrium A to equilibrium B. And this is a difficult task. How can you do it? Well, the most obvious thing is to optimally set the goals that you need to reach. So the European Union, the European Commission, proposed already many years ago by how much we should have reduced the CO2 emissions compared to the level produced in 1990. And we were very good, actually, in achieving that goal, since we were able to reduce our emissions by 24%. This was the first, now one of the first goals that were set by the European Commission. Now, however, with the new Green Deal, which was published in December 2019, the goals have been even stricter than that. And so the new goal is to reduce by 55% the emissions of CO2 by 2030 and to reach the carbon neutrality by 2050. This is really an ambitious goal. And transport and the transport sector has to play a critical role in order to achieve this goal. It has to reduce the CO2 emissions by 90%. This means completely changing the setting, the current setting of this sector. And it has a lot to do with road transport. Okay, so the idea is that, for example, by 2030, the emissions produced by cars should be reduced by 55%, and the emissions produced by vans transporting freight should be reduced by 50%. There is even a more disruptive objective set by the European Union with reference to road transport. By 2035, we should stop producing cars using fossil fuels. This is, of course, this has created an enormous turmoil in the automotive sector, because car makers have to completely change the strategies of their production processes in order to meet this goal. But this is essential if we want to reduce the CO2 emissions produced by road transport. Additional goals, however, have to do with the modal shift, that is the transfer of the demand for road transport to more sustainable transport modes like rail. And here the goal is to double the high-speed rail transporting passengers by 2030 and to double freight transport by rail by 2050. But the final goal, and Elena will be much more specific on this, will be to make the users of the transport system actually paying for the external costs that they are producing when they're using the transport services. And now I'll leave the floor to Elena, who is going to explain us the different policies that can be used in order to reach these different goals.
Many thanks, Lucia, for this introduction. So now I share my slides, just a minute. Okay, no problem sharing. Okay, I think but now you can see my slide.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So now what we can do to deal with this problem of the negative externality that Lucia has explained before. The problem is to identify the most effective, efficient policies for make more sustainable mobility and to address the climate change problem. There are a lot of policies that could be applied by the public authority at local, at national or international level. Some of these policies affect directly the demand for transport services coming from the user, from the passengers, or from the firm as concern the freight transport. In that case, the demand side policy, also called travel demand management policies, aim to affect directly the transport, the traveler behavior and the firm choice, encouraging the most clean, the cleanest to adopt, encouraging to adopt the cleanest solution. The public authority could use policies that directly affect, from the other end, the supplier of transport services, so the industry of transport and logistics services, by regulating these sectors, but also by encouraging and giving incentive for innovation, for introducing both product and process innovation, making more efficient the transport system. Moreover, some policies are needed to improve the infrastructure system that include not only the transport infrastructure, but also the ICT infrastructure that is of key relevance in order to to guide and to manage the physical flow. So now these policies could be based, could use very different type of measures that are classified here in this slide in 4 different categories. Very quickly. So the first one, the command and control or regulation measures, include all the rule that regulate circulation, parking of the vehicle in different transport modes, but also rule about the maximum amount of pollutant emissions per distance traveler. Some rules about the modality to enter to give access of different urban areas. For example, the determination of low emission traffic zone or low speed traffic zone, the parking policies, the time windows policy that are important in order to avoid the overlapping of different flows at the same time on the same infrastructure. So in order to reduce congestion, especially in the peak hours, or the institution of reserved lanes to give priority to the bus and the other public transport services, incentivize their use. The second category of measures include all the economic, the so-called economic market-based policies that are considered more efficient in giving incentive for change of the behavior and for the introducing eco-innovation with respect to the command and control regulation. This type of measures from one hand, affect directly the price of the transport services, and from the other hand, as regards the last measure, the cap and trade, refer to the institution of a carbon market, as we will see in a few minutes. So the subsidies has the aim to reduce the cost of the most clean transport solution. So, for example, encourage to buy electric vehicle or other greener vehicle, to adopt greener solution also in freight transport, and so on. Taxes and similarly, the charges imposed in some urban areas to enter these areas. I refer, for example, to the congestion charging that exists in Milan, or in Stockholm, or in London. These types, both taxes and similarly the charge, follow the so-called Pigouvian approach. So according to the economist Pigou, that recognize the existence of a market failure due to the negative externalities caused by transport, that Lucia has explained very well before, call for the application of the polluter pay principle. That is, the person or the firm that cause pollution by moving in the space, by using transport services, has to pay for this pollution that affect the whole society, as we have seen before. So using the tax or the charge, the price of adopting a pollutant transport solution increases. By this way, we can internalize a cost that is external, and encourage the decision makers in considering, in including this cost in their decisions. So by this way, it gives incentive to change the behavior and to adopt also innovation. The last type of economic market-based measures is called cap and trade system, or better tradable permits. One example is given by the emission trading system developed by the European Union. In that case, a different economic theory is followed. The theory developed by Ronald Case, according to which the problem of the externalities exists because there is not a market of pollution permit. What does it mean? That it recognizes but a certain level, certain maximum level of pollution exists. We have to regulate this level by using the market, not by using the tax. So the solution consists in the determination of the property right to pollute, giving pollution permits to the firm, and leaving then the market in determining the final equilibrium, the market in which the pollution permits are sold or bought by the firms. The emission trading system is based on this type of measures, was introduced in 2005 by European Commission in order to deal with the goal that Lucia has explained before, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And initially it was applied only to air transport industry as concern the transport demand, but recently the Fit for 55 package has extended the application of this type of measure also to maritime and road transport. The public authority can apply also investment policy in transport, IT infrastructure, and eco-innovation, or as Roberta Salamone has explained it before, also in transport it is possible to use the so-called soft measures, so educational schemes and marketing campaign to make aware of the importance of being more sustainable, and also encouraging voluntary schemes for sustainability. Very quickly, the ASI approach was developed in transport.
Hey, Elena, probably your microphone is producing a noise because it's too close to your jumper.
Ah, okay. So I try to. Better now.
Try again, but it was a minor noise. But
Go ahead. Okay.
Can you try?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I hope it is better.
But now, yes, you still.
Okay. So the ASI approach is the approach followed to address climate change by applying both mitigation and adaptation measures to make more sustainable, smart, and resilient transport mobility. It is based so on this scheme. The scheme is sorry, but I can't eliminate this one. Okay. The first pillar is avoid what the unneeded trips, or reduce the number of trips, especially the trips using pollutant vehicles, of course. And as Lucia said before, encourage a shift from the pollutant mode and means towards more clean means, for example, as regards passengers walking, cycling, so active transport, or public transport services. And finally, improve the efficiency of the services of the infrastructure used by an economic and environmental point of view, and introducing new technology. Green innovation has a very important role in achieving these goals and applying this approach. It could concern the people directly, the people of goods, suggesting the best way to move the most sustainable way to move, green innovation could regard the modes, improving their sustainability, could improve the development of the green intermodal infrastructure, and finally could consist in the introduction of new technologies, changing the way in which transport is used of delivered. Here you can find two examples of innovative solutions. On the left, reverse logistics, which refer to the freight transport demand, and on the right, all the sharing mobility services that refer to the passengers demand. Now, another important challenge that should be addressed by the researcher in transport economics is how to suggest to the policymaker which could be the most effective mix of policies and measures that could be applied in order to reduce the negative externality of transport. Since transport is a very complex system, following the definition given by Mario Martina this morning about the complex system, transport has a similarity of with the other complex system. It is a non-linear.
Sorry, Elena. Sorry, we keep on hearing this noise, but I didn't want to interrupt you. You have 5 minutes left, and if you can distantiate a little bit more from the microphone.
Yes.
I mean, we could hear you. It was fine, but just now, like in the last 2 minutes, it went back again.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And 5 minutes.
This is more or less the last slide. Then we go to the conclusion. So I close the conclusion. Okay. About the tool to assess, to describe the functioning of the complex systems, and also to simulate ex ante the effectiveness of different sustainable mobility policies and their ability to reduce the negative transport externalities. The most challenging approach that has been introduced in the transport demand is the agent-based model approach that is included in the theory, is based on the theory of complexity. By this way, it is possible to introduce 3 types of complexity: the spatial, temporal, and behavioral complexity. Example spatial complexity are the spatial autocorrelation between nearby locations, space in the nearby location in the space, or the spatial dependence between different geographical scale. Or temporal scales, considering, for example, the propagation effect that normally is appraisal with a lag, with a temporal lag, or considering the learning by doing process that are used by the decision maker. And finally, the behavioral complexities that permits to consider the presence of a very high number of heterogeneous agents in the transport demand, with which have very different and often conflicting goals. So the agent-based model can both be used complementing and substituting other more traditional modeling technique. But if it is possible, it's better to complement the different tool of analysis. So now, coming to the conclusion, the key message are the transport system is crucial for the socioeconomic development, but from the other hand is one of the most important source of the greenhouse gas emissions and other negative external costs, noise, accident, and so on. Different policies and measures could be implemented to address these negative externalities. Green innovation could play a very important role for sustainable mobility. And among the different methods to assess the impact of sustainable mobility policies, ABMs are considered a useful tool. Here you can find the most important references that we have used for these lectures. And so many thanks for your attention. I hope that you have understood also if there was a little bit noise with my audio, some problems audio. Here you can find also our contacts.
Okay, so thank you very much, Elena and Lucia. I could hear well. I don't know about the others, but there's some questions in the chat, and as we have done, we're running out of time, but as we have done with the previous talks, I invite both Elena and Lucia to reply on the chat. So I will just wrap up and conclude now. I would like to be able to share my slides. Yes, okay. Share screen. This is my screen. Can you see the screen? Yes, I think, right. So what as a, towards conclusion, what I would like to do is to just mention that a lot of the discussion today has been, and I thank all the speakers, has been a lot focused on climate change and some of the environmental challenges that come with climate change, but also in addition to climate change. But of course, we have to keep in mind that there are other sustainability challenges that are worth consideration. Some of you are probably doing research projects on other challenges, not just on environmental ones or the climate change one. Certainly, there are issues of distributional, problems and inequalities on both economic and social grounds that are important and timely as well. We have a number of social problems that come with the organization, the current organization of economic activities at a global scale, both in terms of human rights, issues about slavery in supply chains, migration, and so on. These are all important topics that come with capitalism and with the current organization of capitalism that we need to keep in mind. There's a number of other pollution and environmental related issues that we have not discussed at length today, but are equally valuable and important. Perhaps they're more silent than the very urgent climate change issue, but not less problematic, especially for the repercussions that a lot of the environmental problems and toxicity problems we have on health. And we have discussed that in other modules, especially with reference to air contamination and so on. So we really need to enlarge our understanding, because also these elements could be or can be interrelated and may be a matter of concern for policymakers along with climate change. And so let's keep your mind very broad, at least at the beginning of your PhD. Of course, you have to then focus very specifically on what is your research project, but that I encourage everyone to really be alert on the number of Sustainable Development Goals objectives and on a number of themes and topics. More broadly, when it comes to economic systems, certainly, and so when it comes to our curriculum, certainly there is a big overarching question to all the themes that we have seen today, right? Because today we have gone very specific, even though we've discussed them at the very introductory level. We have seen specific topics, but on top of that, the big overarching question that a lot of economists are now asking is how we can actually reform or rethink capitalism. And that doesn't mean necessarily, inventing another model. It doesn't mean necessarily to have a business, a system or an economic system that is anti-capitalism, or necessarily going to go towards degrowth or other alternative models, although this is a possibility. But also there is a lot of debate about how all these conversations that we have had today are going to, enter into a debate, a broader debate about how to reform and to give new rules to some of the elements of capitalism that could have actually, and this is what research is telling us more and more, be also responsible for some of the sustainability challenges we are trying to fix. And particularly two things are important from that literature, the large-scale overarching literature. One thing that is very important to keep in mind is that perhaps we have to shift from a short-term oriented economic value generation approach that has dominated the last 40 years of capitalism in most countries worldwide to a more long-term orientation. And of course, we're not very well prepared to shift from short-term to long-term. Finance is not very, it's making an attempt now, but everything has, and so is large-scale companies and the financial market. And so, we have been trained and we have a lot of cognitive models that are more short-term profit maximizing. And we have to rethink all that and to if you want to conceptualize how we can make business to survive for the long run without destroying the ecosystems and without exploiting human resources. And so that's a big question mark. We don't know actually how to do that, especially how to change that. Of course, there are, and we have discussed a little bit today, new sustainable macro level and micro level models that could be alternative to the ones that we know or that have been dominant or mainstream in the last 40 years. But there's a lot we don't know about these new models. And so for you, I think it's a challenge both at the macro, meso, and micro level to really unravel how these things work. And a lot of the questions in the chat are actually open questions. We don't have full answers to many of these questions because these topics have been just started to be investigated by research. So my, expectation is that some of our students, not just in our curriculum, but also in the other curriculum, could help, even by collaborating between each other's and across curricula, help us to address some of these very open questions. So with that, I would just conclude by saying that you have, Mario will send you an email with a test, which you know well, because you've done that already with the other curriculum training. And so I please ask everyone to complete the test. And I don't know if there is any other comment that the students want to actually say, but otherwise I think time's up and we're bound to close the lecture today. So I see that there are things in the chat. I don't know if the chat can be saved, Mario, for if yes. some of the questions have not been addressed or answered. I think it's good that we keep them for the future. Okay, so enjoy tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your day. I would then ask. I would then thank everyone from the speakers and also all the participants for, keeping up with these. And I know it's a very tough journey we're bringing you to, and so thank you for also being patient and being with us and for the many questions. Okay, Mari, do you want to say something else?
No, everything was perfect. Timing is perfect. So I will wait a few minutes before sending the test so you can have a break and then do the test as the other days. That is very useful for us to understand what is good and what is wrong of these webinars. And see you tomorrow.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice,
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.